I want to talk about entrepreneurship in the big pivot. There's a lot of talk about what pivots are and what the role of pivots right now in the startup world. So let me take you through what is a pivot. Does anyone know, first of all, what this image is? It's actually a representation of something called the Lorenz attractor. So in systems theory, it's the notion of a butterfly flapping its wings around the other side of the Earth will cause a hurricane, or could cause a hurricane here. It's never been proven that this is actually true, but it's a fundamental understanding of systems and how systems work. So the idea is that any system can be operating one cycle really, really nicely, and some small disturbance all of a sudden flips it to another trajectory. And does it work on that trajectory? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it fizzles out and goes crazy, sometimes it never even makes it to a separate trajectory. So in the startup world, the idea of a pivot is all the buzz, and Twitter is probably one of the best examples of it right now that most people understand. Is Twitter didn't come from Twitter. Twitter came from a company called Audio, which was creating a service of a podcast directory, and then this little butterfly called Apple decided to launch its podcast directory in iTunes. Well, it's a little bit of a disturbance for a startup. So what did they do? They took their resources that they had, the real value of their company and being their people, and came up with ideas of what could they do differently. And out of that is what became Twitter. And slowly, Audio, as Twitter started to gain momentum and started to look like it would work, oscillating on this trajectory, they closed down Audio, and Audio became Twitter. So that's the basic notion of what a Twitter is in the startup world. But there's a bigger game at play with respect to what a pivot is. And that's actually at the game of civilization. So you might think of, well, can civilization pivot? Well, thankfully, a guy has done, a systems philosopher named Ervin Laszlo, has done a bunch of research into this, looking at the history of civilizations. And, well, we kind of think of it, it's a little bit, not surprising that certain civilizations have disappeared. I mean, we all know the stories of civilizations that have totally disappeared. But what's kind of interesting is the idea that, well, we're in a global civilization now. We're more interconnected than we've ever been. And, well, if civilization could pivot again, well, that's pretty important topic to be thinking about. And so we went a little bit further, not just saying, okay, well, civilizations do pivot, they do follow along the trajectory, something happens, and sometimes they make it to a new stable point or not. But overall, in the entire history, we've actually had two fundamental pivots to humanity. The first one being about 10,000 years ago with the domestication of plants and animals, and the second one being 200 to 300 years ago with the industrial era. Well, Laszlo looked at it and said, well, how do these things happen? Well, they happen, what he found is that they happen with the introduction of a technology, which then fundamentally changes our relationship with our environment and each other. So that happened in both those cases. And he also made the argument back in 2001 that he wasn't sure exactly what the technology was, but that the pattern of our civilization was exhibiting signs that it is about to go through pivot. And that next period, particularly the next decade, he said, would be the time that we make our choice as to which direction we're going to go. Do we find a new trajectory, a new pattern, which we actually go to break through, or do we go to the other path where we fundamentally make the choice not to change and end up breaking down? So it's a pretty important idea. And if we buy that, well then let's take a look at what happened. Or let's take a look at where we're at. It's a little dark, but the whole topic is in a way a little bit dark. Let me go back to the ag and domestication. So when we introduced the idea of manipulating our environment to start producing things that we needed, like food, right? We changed the fundamental way that we started to work with each other. We changed our relationship with the environment. We were now no longer just something that existed hunky-dory with everything else, like everything else did. No different, we're just there kind of existing. We moved to this idea of, hey, wait a minute, those animals, we can make them do stuff for us. We can manipulate our environment to produce more food so that we can live longer and live better. Well, that was all really great, and it forced new ways of understanding how we work together as a civilization because our communities got larger, more complex social orders started taking hold, and we fundamentally changed the way we relate to each other. Now, humans have been around for 2 million years, and this just happened 10,000 years ago, so it's really pretty recent that this happened. The next pivot is the Industrial Revolution, and what happened with that? Well, we came up with the wonderful thing of the internal combustion engine, and along with that, mass power generation, so picking up petroleum out of the ground to feed these engines, and being able to produce mass amounts of electricity to support stable infrastructure, to support production at a level that we'd never experienced before. So now we were real masters of our environment and of our world, being able to take bits of the resource of the world around us and make it serve to our needs. Well, so what's that brought us? Well, this focus on real material resources and manipulation of resources has kind of taken us to this trajectory. We've got extraordinary wealth. We've got extraordinary assets. And we look at all the stuff that we have, that we come with, the cars, with everything else that we have. Fantastic amounts of wealth. Our lifespans are longer than ever before. The health is better than it ever was before. So we've had all kinds of wonderful things happen. But at the same time, we're also running into sort of physical limits with the resources we have. I mean, the very limits of food, water, the energy itself, all these things are fundamental limits that we're bumping up against. Not only that, the outputs of the products that we've been doing, all this material manipulation, are creating big countries of plastic floating in our oceans, creating the stuff in the air that's kind of changing to change the entire ecosystem that we live in, fundamentally changing our relationship with the environment. What's more is that it's not just in the idea of products and how we've become mass consumers and everything that we've done, even setting our measures of success based on how much do we produce, global domestic product, all influenced by the notion of manufacturing, this whole mindset that developed. But it's also gone into our organizations. I mean, our model of organization came from the idea of the machine, right? It's this machine that's here to take these inputs and produce an output and do it as efficiently, as effective as possible. Except the idea that these organizations are actually products of our combinations of people. So we've come to know humans as resources, and what have we found with that now? Well, some recent work by John Hagel, John Seeley Brown, Lang Davison at the Center for the Edge at Deloitte did a great study, built this thing called the Shift Index, or the Big Shift Index, I think it is, and wrote about it more in The Power of Pull. But they found by analyzing American public companies that since 1965, our return on assets has actually decreased by 75%. Well, that doesn't make much sense. How could our efficient machine model of organization not be producing increasing returns? Well, there's another effect of it as well, is that we're finding in those organizations that employee engagement with what they're doing is at a record low. Less than 25% of people in an organization have any sort of connection to the work that they're doing and the work of the organization. They're there for the bloody paycheck. And how motivating is paycheck? Does anybody do anything great for a paycheck here? Anyone? No. Well, it's not really that surprising because when we get down to it, when we're treated as resources, we're not treated as humans. And it's actually what we find is kind of funny, this title. Dan Pink's book, Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us, is really kind of a bizarre title. Because what he found in is that what motivates us is purpose. It is our autonomy to be able to decide what we want to do and do it the way that we think it needs done. And then mastery, the ability to get really, really good at doing that thing. But why is that surprising? Like, we all know that from being a kid. We know that from growing up. We know that from doing the things that we actually enjoy. We do them because we're connected to the purpose of it. But it's only in our organizational models that treat us as resources, which are supposed to fulfill the task on a Gantt chart, that we find that we don't give a shit about our work. And this is the fundamental problem of the model of organization that's come out of our model of the Industrial Revolution. And finally, the last part of it is, well, if we've got all this wealth, shouldn't we be happier, right? All our measures say we should be happier. Well, American society is now the most addicted, obese, and medicated society in history. There's something not right about this model. I mean, we take a look at our institutions. I don't have to talk. There's a lot of talk about waiting for Superman. We take a look at education, healthcare. There's been some issue about healthcare in the States. I don't know. We got a socialist model in Canada, so. Healthcare and the financial markets, right? All systems that we've designed, but all systems that are fundamentally failing us. So as Alan Greenspan said, when he looked at we did a look back on what happened with the financial market meltdown, he said, there's a flaw in the model of how the world works. So I think the thing that's interesting is I think there's a good case. Do we know, are we in the big pivot? I don't know, but the system science actually looks like we are repeating the pattern. And it seems to make sense from what we built this last 200, 300 years on. While it was incredibly successful, it's run its course. It's not working for us today. So if civilization is set to pivot, what is it pivoting on? Well, the first is that shift from manufacturing and working with the material. For the shift from that to working with connections. There's also a shift in our focus from, specifically from being focused on the material and products to being focused back on the human. So this is a map of the Flickrverse back in 2005. And what do you see here? I mean, you don't see this big company producing product. It's a map of people. The things we are connecting are people. It's a fundamentally different thing that we're talking about. We're not talking about building new widgets super efficiently. Flickr is not about how do you make how do you amass a massive gallery of photos. It's not about that at all. It's about connecting the individual people who have a passion and a purpose of creating these great photos and sharing them with each other. It's about the connections between people again. The people is what matters. And organizationally, in Power of Pull, Hagel and Seeley and Davison, they make a good case that what we're actually organizing for is not for stock, not for stocks of resources and physical materials, but we're organizing for flows. Well, when you look at that, and it starts to make sense. I mean, this last decade, we've seen some extraordinary new platforms show up, right? We've seen platforms like Google. We've seen platforms like Twitter and Facebook all emerge, and what are they doing? They're now organizing flows. They're organizing connections among people. It's an entirely different thing that our organizations are starting to do. We could take a look at I mean, and it's not just, let me go, what does this actually mean then for organization? Well, here we have Microsoft, which built Windows operating system, which was really wonderful and really well adopted in the corporate market. At the same time, we've got Linux. So everybody here knows about the story of Linux, right? How do all these individual people come together to create something that's better than Microsoft's best operating system? Right? How do flash mobs happen on Twitter all of a sudden? So in Toronto, we had a really bizarre, which kind of really tweaked for me, but it's a really small case that I think everybody can probably relate to, is we had this event called HoHoTO, which was a shared party for the tech and media community in Toronto. It happened in a couple of years ago. All started with a tweet from somebody in Montreal saying, hey, why don't we do a party, rather than us doing separate parties, why don't we just do a party together in a Montreal community? Someone in Toronto retweeted this. And another person said a few hours later, well, why don't we do it for the food bank? We know they need some money. 18 days after that first tweet, there was a party organized with 600 people, $20,000 raised, and 2 tons of food delivered. I mean, you can't plan an event in any other model than using that kind of a platform. I mean, it's extraordinary. So we're fundamentally seeing whole new ways of organizing ourselves. So, not yet. What does it mean for entrepreneurship? Well, it's kind of fun because this is actually a picture of Burning Man. I haven't been to Burning Man, but it seems that's kind of like what entrepreneurship is really becoming. On the one side, we've got the model, all the stuff that's falling apart and burning down and breaking down around us. And at the same time, we're entrepreneurs having a party about it. Because what it means is there's extraordinary opportunity like we haven't seen before. I mean, look how quickly Facebook, Google, everybody is coming up. And each new major success is happening faster than the last one before, right? And it's not just that. It's not just the idea that we can create a monster new platform that everybody else will be able to build something on top of. But it's that we're building it on the basis of humanity. It's about our connections back to people. And we're starting to see in the world of social entrepreneurship and social ventures where these things are starting to connect. So what is Kiva? Is Kiva a finance play? Is it a social venture? Is it a web venture? Who the hell knows? Who cares? It's bringing people together around creating a whole new platform for people to connect to each other around something that's meaningful. The other thing it means is that we really don't know where we're going. We have no idea what's next. People go to Burning Man, they may have some idea of what they're going to do, but they don't really know what's going to happen or how it's going to go. People come together and they connect around some purpose and they make shit. Like, that's what entrepreneurship is about. We make shit. We make shit, and if people like it, great, we make more shit, and we make it better. If people don't like it, well, we stop making it. It's really, I mean, that's really what entrepreneurship has become. It's more raw, more passionate, and more real than it's ever been before. It's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. So, what does this mean? See, I'm failing on my iPad usage here. Okay. What does it mean for me? This is going to be my shameless plug, which will only exist as a slide, which is I'm launching something called epic.io, which tagging right now is the platform for progress on purpose. I don't know how it's going to go. We'll launch it out soon. We'll see what it's going to be. But as an entrepreneur that's been doing all sorts of stuff, I've been in clean tech, I've been in the social nonprofit sector, I've been in health telemedicine, I've been in venture capital. What does it mean for me? This notion of civilization being in a big pivot changes my perspective. It gets me out of the notion that it's technology. This is not about a technology issue. This is not just some sort of little blip, oh, we've got a new bit of technology that's very fun for us to use. It's nice and shiny, let's have fun with it. Great, all these people like it, that's good. No, this is fundamentally transforming humanity. This is the foundation for the future of what humanity will be. I mean, that changes the game a little bit. It means that all of us, this is a game about all of us. Not just all of us in this room, but all of us everywhere. So for me, it's been kind of a discovery going, holy shit, that's what I thought entrepreneurship was all along. To me, it's giving a real connection back to, so what am I actually working on? And why do I care if I'm going to do this entrepreneurship? I vowed 3 years ago never to do it again because I felt the process could be really destructive to people. All the beating the shit out of each other because you're wrong, that's not right, this valuation should be that. Instead of treating each other like human, going, hey, let's create something really bloody cool. But I realize I'm addicted to entrepreneurship, and this has kind of been going, I get it. This is what entrepreneurship is for me. The other thing is, there's totally less risk. I mean, thanks to the product of the Industrial Revolution, really, what the hell is my risk for starting stuff? I've talked to a whole bunch of business schools in particular, and it's hilarious. Like, what is their risk of starting something new? Man, shit, most of them can go home and live with their moms again if they need to. Like, what really is the risk? We have a huge opportunity to step out and actually do things. The tools to be able to do it, the ability to access anybody that we need to, the ability to go onto Quora and say, how the hell do I do startup metrics? Right? The answers are there. It's all about ability to just ask now. It's an entirely different game. Yeah, go on to the next piece. Okay. So I want to end with this little bit. This is kind of fun. I'm stealing this from somebody that I saw do talk about this at PopTech. Before I do, I have one final point. The other thing is, and this was the one I realized I just was going to avoid, which is kind of the whole point of it all, is in the experience of doing that, I've been an entrepreneur and I've been really good at being right about things, right? Making a big business plan and a really good financial model that I can argue the crap forever and prove that I'm right. That game is over. And in doing it this time around, I'm finding that I'm more vulnerable than I've ever been before. That the game in this is going out there going, I really don't know what's going to happen next. And the people that I meet that say, oh, here's what's going to happen, here's what you need to do, I automatically know, bullshit. I don't need to work with that person because no one knows. What I need and what I find is it's about working with real people. So what does vulnerability really mean? Well, Brené Brown did some fascinating research, been looking at connection and what is at the source of connection for people. And she's been looking at this for the last decade. And what she found that at the core of connection is this notion of vulnerability. If we were able to stand there and be vulnerable, to not know, that is the source of the strongest connections. That is the source of the greatest creativity. And in fact, it's the opposite of that. It's our need to be right that has led to the addiction, medication, and obesity in American culture. That's what she's found in her research in any case. So what does that look like for me? So it kind of feels like being naked. Like I'm exposed in a lot of ways. And sometimes being naked is fun, right? It's a really good thing to do. Other times it's kind of invigorating, like going skinny dipping, jumping into the lake, totally freeing and great. And other times it's like, holy shit, I'm standing in front of a whole bunch of people and I'm naked. Like I've got nothing to hide. So it can get really, really scary. But that's good. According to her, that's good. So finally, what does it mean for all of us? Well, to steal that story from PopTech this is a cool picture. Anybody know this? The Hubble Ultra Deep Field. Okay, so this is fun. So they took the Hubble, right, this cool telescope that we made, and they pointed at a little dark spot in the sky, like the size of a grain of salt at the end of my arm, right? Tiny, tiny little thing. And it was dark, right? So there's nothing there. We don't know that anything's there. Well, they had the Hubble go around 800 times and take 800 exposures for 20 minutes each, and what they found is kind of this picture, but a touch more. And they found 10,000 objects in that picture. Well, here's a civilization of humanity who used to think that the world was flat, and then we thought that the sun revolved around us, and now we go, oh cool, we revolve around the sun, that's pretty cool, we're the center of this galaxy. Well actually, what those 10,000 objects are not stars, which would be kind of crazy in that dark spot, but they're actually galaxies. Each galaxy containing 100 billion stars in a spot we thought was dark. Right? Like, do you get it? I mean, we don't know shit. So we gotta stop pretending that we know something. Gotta just stand there with purpose and say, here's what I'm trying to work on. Gotta get shit done. And go, whatever the hell happens, happens. And in a way, the best summary, if the vulnerability stuff is true, it's in that space of being vulnerable that is our greatest potential. So to put it another way, I mean, if I could sum it all up, it's basically saying, let's get naked and make the future of humanity. So that's it.